My name is Raman, and guess how many patents this guy has? Zero. I'm not a patents guy or anything like that. I was a startup talent guy. What is that even supposed to mean is, look at this guy. So me and Jonathan, we're not friends or anything, but Jonathan, I got introduced to him 2 years ago by some Nordic investors. And these Nordic investors, they said, we've started investing in some retail companies. And I was like, retailing what? Selling to who? And then they said, retailing in the moon, they said. I was like, what the heck? And then this guy was the guy they invested on, selling oxygen on the moon. So, of course, I got pretty curious. And interestingly, what is my life day in and day out is meeting the founders who are doing impossible companies. I mean, you got to go and see what Helios is all about. But interestingly, it's not just Jonathan, but on a daily basis, I meet every founder within deep tech and all other spaces, from aerospace to companies within biosensors, organic electronics, you name it. And they're trying to say something incredibly difficult that they want to pull. And then they want to find the dream team. And the problem in finding the dream team is you cannot do anything that you know before to find the dream team. You cannot put up a job ad and hope people will apply, because the kind of skills and the kind of people you're looking for are not looking and reading job ads in many cases. You cannot say, I'm going to do headhunting. These people are not like actively on LinkedIn sending messages back and forth. So if everything that you know traditionally that the traditional recruiters used to do doesn't work, what do you do? This was literally the question I was asked to solve 11 years ago when I became head of talent of one of the largest startup ecosystems of Sweden called Sting. And I did solve it, and I'm going to tell you how. If a room has VCs, any room that has any venture capital people from Europe or especially Nordics, I can guarantee that some of them are friends of mine and some of them are enemies of mine because we've had too much history. These are some of the VCs that I support today. They are portfolio companies. So I'm not working directly with the VCs, Jesus, but the companies that they invest in, I support them in scaling. So I'm going to give you only 3 things as key takeaways that I thought I learned in my life working in this job. As the introduction said, I was an engineer before, and in the middle I also tried a bit on comedy, and then I thought this was more funny than comedy. So then I entered the startup scene, and no regrets. This is the first thing I want to teach or share. The first thing is most early stage startups, especially deep tech, they were all saying they need to commercialize their research, and then they're looking for their first commercial co-founder or head of business development or sales. And when they decided to find their first business person to their team, and then they said, we don't have any money, we're going to offer only stock options. So maybe we could offer half the salary or even less. The interesting learning is it was easier to recruit people who are above 15 years and 20 years than it was to recruit 5 years to 10 years. And the reason why the higher the experience, it was easy to recruit for stock options and half the salary, is because the problem is most startups, when you think about it logically, you think like, if I don't have much money, I should go for the least experienced person in the room because that's the person I can afford. But the problem is, if you're looking for someone with 3 years experience or 4 years experience, their reliance on their salary to survive and their reliance on their salary to build their life is much more, that it's actually harder for many younger people who are in their 30s or 35 to give up their salary and work purely for stock options, whereas it was easier for experienced people to do that. So what I want to tell you is not like a hard and fast rule, but this is what I wanted to tell you. The difference is, if you're a startup trying to build a team towards your first customer, you're not looking for a talent trader, you're looking for a talent investor. And what I mean by a talent investor is anytime you're saying, part of my compensation is stock options or shares, what you're saying is invest your skills in our company and we'll give you shares for it. So instead of asking them for capital, you're asking them for skills, experience, and time. And those are the talent investors. Street name, entrepreneurs. So your talent investors are what we usually call entrepreneurs who actually love to work in the long range focus. They're not looking for, the difference is talent traders are looking to trade their skills for the highest buck in the market today. These are your classical employees, your consultants. Anyone who wants to trade their skills for the market value today is your talent trader, whereas talent investor is someone who is looking to say, I want my investment 10x, 5x in the next 3 to 5 years. So I would rather invest my skills rather than trade. So which means the minute you understand the difference between talent trader and talent investor, your whole mind gets blown, because what you were doing instinctively was actually correct for talent trader. As you can see in the little text, if you can't afford a talent trader and you don't have much money, you go down in the experience. Whereas for talent investors, if you can't afford a 5-year experience, you go for 10 years. If you can't afford a 10-year, you go for 15 years. If you can't afford a 15 years, you go for 20 years, because you're asking them to invest. And you have to think in your mind exactly like the financial investment. If you go to a fund that is 1 million euros and then they say no, you're not going to go to another VC that has like €500,000 investment. You're going to go for bigger and bigger VCs. And it's the same logic here. So then you don't have to worry about, can I afford this experienced person? No, because you're looking to ask them to invest their skills, which means you break the employer-employee dynamics. You're building a team. You're not managing an employee. You're building a team, and when you're building a team, you don't think of employer-employee, and therefore the affordability paradox doesn't exist. What's the second key learning? So the first key learning is there are talent investors and talent traders. Okay, now you're saying, I want to find talent investors. What do I do? There are only 2 requirements for a talent investor. One is they have to understand what you're doing and they have to see the potential of your company. Second thing is they have to be in the mood to respond to you. And if you crack these 2, you've done what you have to do. Who can understand you? I mean, interestingly, back in the days when I was helping startups 10 years ago, suddenly I get called upon by my seniors, and then they are saying, Raman, you're not doing anything for diversity. All the teams that you're helping are homogeneous teams. They are recruiting people of same gender, ethnicity, language, and you're just sitting and watching. I was like, I thought I was paid to do that. And they said, no, you have to help them be more diverse. And then I asked the founders, why the heck do you recruit this guy or girl? And then they say, we have a lot of shared context. We grew up in the same neighborhood. We studied in the same university. We have a lot of shared context that helps us communicate with each other with ease. And then I thought, interesting, so what if I play with a different idea? What if I replace the age, gender, university, ethnicity, language kind of factors with what if I'm running a startup where we are targeting Volkswagen or some similar customers. You have been working in a company where you also have worked with similar customers. I'm in a pre-seed or seed investment phase. You've also been in a startup in a pre-seed or seed investment phase. So I started replacing the shared context of culture with shared contexts that are extremely business critical. And interestingly, it didn't matter. So even if I replace the cultural context with business critical shared context, 2 people were able to communicate with such ease. So it didn't matter what context we share. As long as we have 2 to 3 shared contexts, we will be able to communicate with each other. So then the question is, you have to be able to find, if you're running a quantum company, you should be able to be smart enough to see within the last year, what are all the quantum companies, quantum startups that were created, or quantum companies that have scaled, and which of those companies had similar customers that you're sharing, and then you will be able to communicate and they will be able to see the potential of your startup. So you need to be not looking at roles and recruitment of roles or people, but rather identify contexts that are critical and play with that. The second question is, of course, who will respond? Okay, now you found all the people that are shared customers or shared business niches, shared industry, and you 2 are able to understand each other. But the problem is you don't know who's going to respond. And this is where I want to introduce you to a basic foundational signal processing. And what is signal processing is, you see some online events or you see some events that are happening and how those events increase the probability of somebody responding to you today. So if Northvolt is laying off people, this is the fun one. When Telia was actually recruiting last year a chief data an analytics officer. I thought, this is interesting because if Telia is recruiting a chief data analytics officer, which means the entire data analytics and data science team of Telia will have a heightened probability to move. Because if their head is moving, they also feel like, maybe I should also explore new opportunities. So on a given day, there are so many little micro events that are happening that are playing with the probability of people wanting to move to a new company. And if you combine who can understand you, who shares your customers, who shares your investors, who shares your industry, with who has certain events happening this week that increases their probability, then voila, you've achieved the people who understand you and also respond to you. These are some examples of events that increase the probability of people, of course. Acquisition, mergers, restructuring, market focus change, high attrition, leadership change, lack of funding, lack of revenue. There are multiple others. So in short, like I was saying, instead of going with job ads, instead of going with requirements, instead of going with every traditional approach, if you are able to think in your mind that it didn't matter who you can afford or not afford, the magic question is, do you want to invest your skills in our company? If you have the courage to ask that question, plus, and this is your pickup line, do you want to invest your skills in our company? You know that we have shared context and you have a perfect timing. Would you want to join my team? This is what I want you to be able to execute and pull. But then the question is, how do we actually do that? It sounds like, okay, it sounds fancy, but then how do you know which are all the companies that are similar to yours? How do you know which of those companies, who are the people behind those companies? How do you even reach them? How do you know what kind of processes you need or tools you need to achieve that? Well, that's where we have the workshop, where we will be actually working together step by step on how to do this. So if you are in some way building your first team or scaling your team, expanding to markets, or trying to, disrupt the whole world of finding your next team member, then I would say we should spend some time together because we have shared context and you have the perfect timing. So you should join our workshop at 3 o'clock in Palver. Yeah, that's where we will be. Join us there. And of course, anybody who wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to be happily in touch with you and chat with you and see how we could collaborate. But now, I'm an odd duck who has been doing crazy things, but we have even more amazing people in this field who has been doing incredible work. And 2 of those people are going to join me to a discussion, panel discussion, where we will be talking about this topic of talent and teams and startups and how do we scale a company? What are the challenges we have and how do we solve it? So I want you to invite 2 amazing people. One is Karita, investment manager of Spintop Ventures, and then we have Ann Badan, founder of A2B Search. Please give a big hand. It won't move to the next slide. I didn't do it.
Hi, everyone. Did you get your coffee?
We could start with an introduction. So,
yes.
Anne and Karita, please introduce yourselves, starting with Anne.
All right. My name is Anne Badan. I'm originally from Geneva, Switzerland. I've had a long international career before I came to Finland 17 years ago. I worked for big international organizations like the World Economic Forum. I worked in Formula One as well, in tobacco industry. I did lobbying for governments as well. So always with big global brands. And I fell in love with a Finn, which is the reason why I ended up in this country. Traveling from Thailand to Finland was a bit of a shock. But more importantly, from a career perspective, it was a bit of a halt. 17 years ago, the country was very different. And with my skills and my international background, it wasn't that simple to find something here without Finnish language. And that's what I say usually, the country turned me into an entrepreneur, because if you can't find what you want, then you have to build it for yourself. So that's how I started my journey, working with impact investing, sustainable philanthropy, and different kinds of work related to high net worth individuals. And in 2015, after the refugee crisis, we created a company called The Shortcuts that is owned by Startup Foundation that has also Slush, Junction, Kiwas, and Maria01 as a brand. And bringing more than just students, but other groups in society to consider tech and startup as a career path, especially to integrate, to use their skills, pay taxes in this country, and bring international expertise to companies that are trying to scale on a global level. And now I'm actually running a company called A2B Search, which is an executive search business, headhunting, specialized in fast-growing startup tech, startup scale-up VC and private equity companies in deep tech and tech in general.
Thanks.
Okay. Hi everyone, lovely to meet you. My name is Carita Seppa. I'm currently the investment manager at Spintop Ventures. Spintop Ventures is a Swedish early stage fund, so we invest into pre-seed, seed and Series A startups. We're pretty sector agnostic, which means that we invest into deep tech in general to software-driven technology companies across the Nordics. So pretty much the rest of the team is located in Sweden with one partner in London, and myself, I sit here in Helsinki. So I'm pretty much focused on the looking after Finnish deal flow and investments for the fund. My background comes from the startup side, as well as previous to that from international relations and public diplomacy. So before joining Spintop, I was a co-founder, still one of the owners in Testback. It's a Finnish tech company. They focus on developing energy solutions for emerging markets. So I've been dealing and working quite a lot in emerging markets, in Asia, Africa, Latam. And I always like to say that when you think of hardware startups and you have software startups, that the real reason between the word soft and the hard is that selling physical products is extremely difficult. And imagine doing that in emerging markets. And then when you combine that you want to do impact, that's a guaranteed to scare away any investor that you ever want to attract to join your company. So I've definitely been dealing on that side of the table as well. And of course, before Testback, I worked with Finnish Embassy in Serbia and with our Finnish Foreign Ministry. So working with different organizations and agencies. So it's a little bit a typical journey to the VC side. But I think if there's anything what I do love with the Spintop team is that every team member, which is something we're going to discuss more today about talent, we wear different hats, which means that by having different expertise and backgrounds, we bring different opinions and diverse skill sets on the table. So I do believe that I think that's one of the greatest assets, not only VCs, but startups can have in general.
Wow, that is a really solid intro. Geez, now I feel humbled to be in this panel. So you have built companies, you've been working with a lot of companies. And I always think like now with new deep tech spaces coming up constantly, with new areas and new niches, there is always going to be a talent shortage. Because people need a strong reason to move to Nordics, especially if it is New York or London, people just pass by. But here, we don't pass by much this part of the world. So what do you think about this challenge of talent shortage, and what are some solutions that you see in companies that they go around?
I mean, let's face it. I mean, I'm from Finland, but I returned back to Finland before the COVID. So before that, I was living in different parts of Europe mainly. And Finland is a great place to be, but it's definitely not already in terms of the weather that we have. A lot to do, not just with the culture, the environment, but there are definitely things that are not as attractive like you compare to London in itself, right? So we need to have something else. And I don't want to even get to the Finnish language part either. So it is hard to definitely retain, talent. But I do feel that also one of the biggest challenges that we do have a lot of talent already in Finland, to be honest. So it's not just that we're seeing a shortage, that we need to get more experts. We have a lot of talents here, but the challenge is that they have not been able to find for XYZ reason the right, let's say the workplace. Like in Anne's case, you had to create your own business. your own opportunities around it. So I think we need to also focus, how can we basically find the right, employment opportunities? How can we really report the existing talents already in the country before they just simply leave again as well? So it's like a two-way of, discussions that we have.
Yeah.
I think I should quote my husband. He always says that probably, you go to New York for the city, you come to Finland for the people. So there must be good people, right? If you stay here. No, but I agree. The shortage of talent is real, and it's real everywhere. It's not just deep tech, it's for any kind of industries. The way of maybe looking at the handicap is to turn it into a different mindset on how are you looking at the talent, what kind of people are you looking for. Is there a way to actually look at different elements in a different way? So for instance, transferable skills is something that I insist a lot when we are doing research for the right profile, because you can think of, I want an expert, or I want someone, a scientific background type of person. But if you are a deep tech founder, you create it based on your knowledge already. You have a founding team, you may have already the expertise from the beginning. What you're lacking is maybe commercialization skills, people who have an understanding of how to run a business, not just sell, but just also run a company. What are the best transferable skills that you can actually get into your team? How do you analyze the talent that is around that could be fitting your company? Do they have the mindset that would be necessary for, the acceleration, the global ambition that most of the deep tech companies have in mind? How would you think of location in a different way? If it's a handicap to get people here in Finland, where is the best talent? If you look at nanofabrics or quantum computing, might not be here, maybe somewhere else. So why not transfer your focus on a different geography? Or hybrid and remote models are very much now in the culture of work. So how can you best make your company attractive for the talent to want to join you, because you make it easier for them to join? That, I think, is also a way of looking at it. But the compensation, the different ways you can attract, and let's be real, Finland, it might not be the first choice for a lot of people, but when you think of the quality of life, the work-life balance that you can have, the connectivity, the fact that everything is safe, there's a lot of good element once you are also interested in a specific field and you would join the company because of the specialization in it. I think the gaming industry is one that has already proven that people do move if they are passionate and purpose-driven, and some people are not interested purely in money. They also want to join a company that has a massive impact on a global scale, I would say. So there are plenty of reasons why it can or it shouldn't just be seen as a challenge, but more like how can you turn the shortage talent as an opportunity for you to broaden your way of looking at the talent pool?
Exactly, because I've been kind of struggling with this myself, which is if you have to maximize the talent pool within a country, then some little inhibitions, which is one thing is when it comes to deconstructing the skills and not look for the exact role of experience within VCs. I think Karita here is like a perfect example, which is normally VCs in the past, they would say, you need to have 3-5 years of VC experience to enter the investment space. But now inviting a founder to work as investment manager, I think that's your work, Anne. And I think that's a healthy way of looking at what does they need and what kind of challenges would they solve, and do we really need someone to come only from this background?
Exactly. And I think it's a very good point, because if you look sometimes, when I was talking about transferable skills, if you think of someone who worked for Volt, who's had a leadership role, for instance, or any of the very fast-growing companies in Finland that have a global ambition, they've seen what it is to scale at a really fast pace, adaptability, growth mindset, and all the processes that are necessary to scale. would that person be more interesting for a deep tech company that might not have the hard tech expertise, however, can adapt to another industry and then bring that commercialization of the R&D or the tech from the company, or someone who has a consulting background or has seen a lot of different, very high-paced type of work, a lot of volume of different companies and structure that can adapt and learn and strategically look at things in a faster way. Would this be more valuable maybe to join like a deep tech company than yet another maybe researcher or PhD that you might already have from the team in the first place? So again, looking at how and where you can find that type of profile is where the diversity of thoughts as well can come in, is quite interesting to go beyond the beaten path, I would say.
But another area that I feel that was contributing to the challenge on talents is the funding. Because when I go to the US, when I go to meet startups in the US, both in the Valley or in East Coast, they always are able to raise with just pitch deck $1 million or $2 million with just pre-product, pre-revenue, pre-go-to-market. But in Nordics, I think the fundings are extremely small ticket sizes. And also there's always the founder constantly need to be in filling in grants and fundraise and doing the VC work to get money. So is funding size small? Does that contribute to the challenge? What do you think, Karit?
I think there's definitely differences between, if we look US specifically compared to Europe in so many different ways. And one of them exactly, as you said, is that in US you can pretty much investors, they make decisions even within like minutes and hours just based on a pitch deck, right? So we do have a different type of, specifically in the Nordics, a more, I would say it goes back to also the way we are in terms of, if you look, for example, Finland and Nordics people, we like to take our time when it comes to making decisions. I mean, this is also something which is quite interesting, that when it comes to hiring, for example, employee in US, they make decisions very fast. If it doesn't work, it's also very fast. You get out of it, right? Here, you pay attention to that. The process is longer because you want to also make sure that you could have the right employee or the right person hired. Because, well, there's of course all the labor laws that goes around it, but I think all that, it tells about a culture differences when it comes to sometimes the decision making as well. And yes, you see that on the investment phase. Something I've seen a lot on both sides of when was as a founder and when now an investor. If you talk typically with American investors, for example, and when they talk to the founders, they look the whole world. They look how that company can disrupt the whole sector, whether it's in a deep tech, but in a global way. They have already such a big way of thinking that no, you're gonna make the whole change. For example, I remember I talked to an investor and he was saying that your energy tech solutions, you're gonna replace all the diesel generators in the world. And I was like, damn, I never even considered that big. But that's the way. They look in a very different way, when I feel that maybe typically here in Europe, we are more focused on, okay, let's say maybe the European market or perhaps the Nordics market, and we like to analyze a lot of things. So there are benefits in both ways, don't get me wrong. But yes, I do think it goes back also on the culture differences that we have. But the money is there. So it's not like there is not money to invest into startups. So that you were also mentioning before, there's definitely, dry powder. There's a lot of still, I mean, we are still looking very actively to invest in SpinTop as well, to deep tech startups, for sure. So it is there. It's just the processes are very different.
I'd say that it's a fact that the funding or the size of the ticket is smaller, but everything is relative, right?
Yeah.
So what are you comparing to, where and who? So if you look, for instance, in Finland, at least I know for a fact, in Sweden as well, you can leverage easily your private money with public funding. So if you can multiply that, as opposed to maybe other markets, that might actually be a good thing. That also depends on how much cost do you have, how much money do you need to start with. If your salary level is much lower, let's say in Finland than the Bay Area, it also makes a big difference. So everything has to be kind of measured against different element, I would say, or indicators. And I think that that's maybe where the non-dilutive financing that are available for deep tech company. I mean, Sweden is, probably better in Sweden, but I think that the government is pouring a lot of money there, and they put their words, or how do you say, words where the mouth is, or something like that. they follow what they say, they do at least, which is a good thing. And I think that last year it was like startups, deep tech startups in Sweden had like 4.7 something billion euro that were raised, so it's not nothing either. So I don't know that one can really compare everywhere the same way, but definitely there are some elements that can have an impact for sure. Yeah.
But on the another follow-up on the investment front is, if it's just a SaaS or marketplace or e-commerce companies, it's easy to evaluate the company. It's easy to make investment. When it comes to deep tech, where every case is unique, do you have any specific challenges on evaluating deep tech startups, and how do you do that?
Yeah. I think the key here is when I also earlier said that that's why on the investment or the VC side, you want to have investors, again, with different skill sets and hats, because you're completely right. Deep tech as a sector is such a vast sector, which means that it can be very hard to evaluate, let's say, space technologies in comparing, say, quantum tech, right? So typically, this is what a lot of different funds would have. You want to have personnel or the team members that have, maybe one of the person is your AI expert. For example, like in Spinto, we actually wear different hats from different sectors, which means that when it comes to evaluating a startup, of course, we can also then refer back to, let's say, the expert within the team as well. So I know that if there is more like a deep tech startup, I also know that, hey, I know who to actually go to as well, because they have invested, they worked on that sector. So I think that's the key, and typically you would see that in a lot of funds that focus on deep tech as well. And that also goes the same way when it comes to, let's say, evaluating the startups themselves. The same thing goes there. You want to show in your founding team as well different skill sets. And I do feel that especially sometimes deep tech startups is not just enough to showcase that you have amazing PhD, you have the researcher background, you have the technology understanding. Obviously, you need to have that to build the deep tech. But investors are also looking that you have to commercialize it. We're investing because we need to get an exit. You have to be building a commercially viable product. Can you sell it? Do you know who to sell it? What is your go-to market? These things are extremely important. So you want to showcase within your founding or the management team that you also possess these kind of capabilities. If you don't have that background, it doesn't mean that that's the end. It just means that you need to then prove yourself as a founder that I can sell this. And then to showcase that, hey, I already have these agreements in place, even if you don't have a paying customer. But very important to take the commercializing aspect into account, especially when it comes to, fundraising. Founder-led sales are the key part when it comes to early stage startups. They need to be proven by the founders. You cannot hire just somebody to do that. Obviously, you can hire people, but we've seen a lot of startups and they actually struggled because of that. They didn't have the commercial expertise within the founding team, and now they are struggling in fundraising, the follow-up rounds in some of the startups, because they're missing that and they have not been able to validate their product with the founder-led sales. So just as important it is to see the skill sets and the whole discussion of diversity that we have, it's the same thing when it comes also to the founding side.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a difference evidently from a VC point of view when you invest in the founding team, or if you're in executive search where you're helping the company to get to the next stage, whether it's seed or Series A or whenever, or IPO readiness. But often what you see is one of the first role that comes as really important is the finance, the CFO. It's one of the top roles that we get. First off, because once you've gone through the first hurdle, you need to prepare for the next round. And most of the people, especially in deep tech, do not come from a finance background. So yes, as a founder, you need to be the one fundraising and then, convincing people. But ultimately, at some point, you need someone who's an expert with numbers, who can make your case. You can go to different places to open the doors, to get to speak to the right people. So the CFO role is an interesting one. But beyond that, it's like you need to have that diversity of thought, and we're not diversity as non-homogeneous in the sense that you need to have a really diverse team in order to actually bridge. If you're hardware or deep tech company, and you need to be able to have someone who plays or is a bridge between the technology and then the commercialization of your business. So how do you turn your innovation into something concrete that will bring revenue and that will have an impact? And so these kind of people that have multidisciplinary type of, mindset or ability to maybe bridge better the founding team or the tech people with the rest of the team as well is super important. So diversity of thoughts, but then also ability to commercialize and then run the company to the next level within the early stage is quite important, I would say. As well.
I mean, that's so true. And back in the days, when it was regular tech software companies, it was always like an early stage when it's a tech-founded company, a CTO-founded company. They would say that it will be more biased towards product and tech talents and not much commercial. But when it comes to researcher-founded deep tech companies, that is kind of amplified in some way because the whole foundation is the deep tech. And so in this case, are there any specific challenges in evaluating and attracting the right commercial founder for the research founders?
I can definitely see that can be very difficult. That's why I was also saying that even if the founders, they are all from a research background, you can still showcase that, hey, you have some level of, again, commercial skill sets by being the key person for showing that, hey, we have now signed up with these LOIs or some agreements already with these entities. That showcases that you were the one doing this kind of, and that's a pre-commercial work. The other way is that, of course, there is a lot of talented people also around, and I do believe at least the advantage that when it comes also more on the commercial side, instead of finding the specific deep tech talents, it might be actually easier to find them. And also, it doesn't need to be necessarily, again, like a country region focus, like Anna, what you were mentioning, we have the hybrid model. You could have that located outside the Nordics, another person. Not maybe ideal in certain cases, but I mean, the whole world is basically open opportunities. And a lot of companies are doing exactly that you might have a Finnish company, but then you open another company or another offices in another region, which makes more sense for you to have the right talent to hire in there instead of necessarily attracting them to Finland. Not the perfect scenario for countries like Finland, for the government, in terms of the taxpayers, right? But this is something that is happening right now as well. But I would say one key important as well, like an advice also for early stage startups, especially with the research background, is also to make sure that a lot of them are spin-offs from university, and you might also then have the universities, maybe professors, research centers in your cap table. So be also careful with the cap table management from the beginning, because a lot of VCs, they don't want to invest into a startup where 50% is already owned by a university, or the IP is not even owned by the company themselves. And this happens quite a lot, and it is understandable, because when you're starting a company, the first thing in your mind is not to be thinking necessarily like, okay, is my cap table going to be attractive enough for the investors when it comes to fundraising? But it's really important to already look into that at the early stages, because when it comes to the follow-up rounds, obviously you want to ensure that the founders, the management teams, they have enough equity in terms of dilution later on. So I think that's also very, very important to look in the very early stages.
I mean, then the last question I want to talk is exactly an extension of that, which is, in deep tech startups, how effective are stock options as an incentive? And how does it actually contribute to the culture of a successful company? What are your thoughts on that?
I do think it's still definitely, let's face it, most of the startups, that's pretty much typically the only way as well. You do it in the beginning. But this is another reason, especially in the Nordics, so there is that option. There is a lot of grants available, and most of these, let's say, deep tech research-based startups, they have typically already accessed on the grant in the beginning. So you might have already on that option to leverage the stock options together with the salary when it comes to hiring the right talent, which might be actually much better than comparing to a SaaS. Typical SaaS company wouldn't have this type of grant availability. So there's benefits on both sides. In general, I mean, of course, it's still a startup, so it's always gonna be risky for anyone to join it. So I don't think there's any right or wrong answers, but the stock options. I would say from the founder side as well that is a key way to also say that the person that you're hiring in the early stages of your days, they are also willing to invest and be interested in creating a successful business with you. So it's a motivation as well on both sides. It's not just money related in that sense. So I would say that's the right way from a founder's perspective as well to see that, is this person the right one to join? Do they believe into this mission as much as I do? And right now, most of the companies, when it comes to their first hiring, it is always the stock option. It's always there. And there is a lot of people who want to be doing that. Doesn't mean it's the rest of the life. This is another thing. It can be just for a few years.
No, but I agree. And I think that if you think 10 years ago, maybe not so much. It wasn't that attractive potentially in Finland because it was too risky. People wanted a stable salary and had a different mindset because there were not so much evidence of success stories in the country or that they could relate to. But now we've seen quite a few unicorns and good examples. So I think that people are way more open to the idea. And it really requires for the candidates to have an appetite for risk. So they need to be comfortable with that. Of course, if you don't, then maybe it's not the right company for you. But at the end of the day, if you want to have key hires, people that can bring high value added quickly, that might be the only way to attract them because you're not that attractive otherwise in terms of wages. So there are different roles where you have to also look at what is the best kind of combination. Some jobs that are directly related to customers and revenue generation, you can use different types of short-term incentives, but the long-term one definitely needs to be there. And I think that deep tech also, one needs to be careful because it's not like software. The acceleration or the speed at which you execute or where you scale is much longer. So it's a risk if you take and hire talent and then you have like a short vesting period or, I think that one needs to always be careful in. Well, every case is different, I imagine, but if you have like a 4-year vesting period and a cliff or something in 1 year time, at least minimum, so that you can see what is the added value of the individual, I would be very careful as a deep tech founder to not give away so quickly access to the stock option because that might, bite your later on. So just to think of these elements might be important. And then weigh also, are we talking about the first hire? Are we talking about the 10th hire or the 100th hire? Your system will have to adapt as well and make sure that but definitely from a talent perspective nowadays, especially in the Nordics, in the past it was more in the US and then it was...
now it's becoming very common.
It's common in Europe, and I think that has become attractive because people want to be part of the ones that can also get a portion of the pie and contribute to the success of company.
Great. I mean, we are on time, so let's all contribute to each other's success. And thank you so much for taking the time to spend time with us. And in 10 minutes, I will see you, whoever you join for the workshop at Palaver. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.